this video, we are going to be continuing on with our Frankie animation. Particularly, we're going to put some arms on him. We're going to start off using After Effects shape creation tools to create an arm and a hand. Then, by using simple parenting, we are going to begin animating that hand and arm to follow along with the movements of Frankie's body. I'm going to click on the shy switch for these arms here and the visibility, and I'm just going to shy them all like that so I can start fresh. And the first thing I want to do is create a new shape layer. And I'm going to come over to my toolbox in the top left, and I'm going to choose my pen tool. And before we use the pen tool, let's talk about the fill and stroke properties for this particular shape. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure that there's no fill on this shape. We're going to use a stroke only. The way you take away a fill is to not click on the color swatch window, but click on the name fill itself. And that will bring up the fill options, and just click on the none swatch on the left. For the stroke, this time we will click on the color swatch. Let's click on the eyedropper and sample the blue from Frankie's body. And I'm going to say OK. The width of this line will be determined by this value here. Currently, I'm set at 19 pixels. I will adjust this as we go. All right, I still have my pen tool selected, and I'm just going to click somewhere on the left of my composition once, and I'm going to click about this far down on my composition just so that I have an arm that isn't too long and isn't too short. If I press Shift on my keyboard, I can create an arm that is completely vertical. And there is the width of my arm. I want that to be a little bit wider than it currently is. I'm going to use this value up here and click on that and drag to the right until I have an arm width that I'm happy with. Roughly, for me, 64 seems like a good width. Now, before we do anything else, I want us to consider every shape that we create has an anchor point. An anchor point is the point around which that shape makes its transformations. Currently, if I select the shape layer in my layer panel down below, you can see that the anchor point for this shape is at the center of the composition. But I want this anchor point to be at the point around which this arm is going to rotate. And that will be this shoulder up here at the top of this arm. So let's move this anchor point into its proper position by using the anchor point tool. I click on that and put that at the very top of that shape. Okay, to test that this is working okay, I'm going to come over to my rotate tool, and I'm just going to click and drag over top of that arm, and you can see that it is in fact rotating correctly. Okay, now before I do anything else, let's name this layer. I'm going to select it in my layers panel. I'm going to press return, and I'm just going to call this arm. Click my select tool and deselect that. Let's create the hand. This hand is going to require that I zoom in just a little bit. I'm going to press Command plus sign on my keyboard and pan over just so I can see the bottom of the hand like that. We're going to create this hand on its own separate shape layer. Let's start by going to the layer drop-down menu, selecting new, and again we're going to say a shape layer. And this time we are going to use one of After Effects shape tools. I'm going to click and hold on the rectangle, and I'm going to open up the rounded rectangle tool. I'm just going to click and draw with this tool a rounded rectangle that sits at the end of the arm that's roughly that dimension. I'm going to come back here to my fill and stroke properties, and I'm going to click on the color swatch next to fill to open up the shape fill color properties, and I'm going to select the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select the green of Frank's face. I'm going to say OK. For the stroke, I'm going to get rid of the stroke, and remember to do that we don't click on the color swatch, we click on the name stroke and select none right there. Okay, now I've mentioned before that we can have more than one shape on a shape layer. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to come over here to my pen tool, and I'm going to draw out Frankie's fingers while this shape layer is still selected. Now we have both the original rectangle of the back of the hand and this new shape that I've created here. Now this is meant to be a finger, so this styling is a little bit wrong. I'm going to come back to my fill and stroke properties, and again I'm going to click on the fill name to select the none swatch. And from the stroke property, again I'm going to click on the actual color swatch, and again using the eyedropper tool, I'm going to select the skin color of Frank's face. The width of that finger is definitely too much, so I'm going to drag that down to something that fits the proportion of that hand a little bit better. I'm going to drag this up a little bit so that we can explore some of the properties in this new shape layer that we've just created here. Here we see the properties that we've been playing with up here, but now displayed in the layers panel down below. We saw in the last video how we can animate the path tool to create animation within that finger, but I don't think that's necessary. I'll leave it up to you to decide if you want to have individual fingers animated. But I do want to change some of the stroke properties, and I'm going to click on the disclosure triangle there, and I'm going to change line cap from butt cap to round cap, just to give it a little bit of shape. All right. Again, with my pen tool selected, I'm going to draw out another shape. I'm going to have to drill down again on this one to make sure that the butt cap is round cap. A few more times. I'm just going to zoom out so I can see this now. Now, before I do anything else, let me just rename this layer. Press return on my keyboard. Call that hand. All right. Now, and just like the arm layer, I'm going to want to make sure that the anchor point is in the right position. Again, you can see for this layer that the anchor point is at the center of the composition. Again, I'm going to come over to my anchor point tool in my toolbox, and I'm just going to reposition that over the top center of that hand, where the hand and the arm overlap. If you want to see how that rotates, choose your rotation tool and click on that hand, and you can rotate it like this. Now, it is actually quite possible for us to have created this hand and this arm on one layer. But there are some advantages to keeping these layers separate, as we've done. Our next step is we want to parent this hand to the arm. Wherever the arm goes, this hand is sure to follow. Let's make sure that that happens. And we can do that using what we call the pick whip. The pick whip allows you to take a layer, the hand layer for example, and parent it to another layer, the arm layer in this case. I've just parented the hand layer to the arm layer. Let's select the arm layer, and I'm going to use my selection arrow and move it around, and you can see that the hand goes where the arm goes. We are now ready to animate. We're only going to be animating the arm, so let's hide the hand by clicking on its shy switch. Now there's three properties that we're going to animate here. Let's open up the first of them by twirling down our disclosure triangle for the arm layer. And if you want to check that your hand and arm parenting is working properly, just rotate your arm like this, and if the hand moves with it, then you are doing fine. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the arm just a little bit like that, just so that the arm is going to hang at the side of his body. I'm going to reposition the arm by using my selection tool and just clicking on that arm and moving that down so that it is inside of his body like that. We're going to be animating these properties, so let's click on the stopwatch for both rotation and position. There's one more property that we want to reveal here, and that's under the contents section. I'm going to twirl that down, and again, one more time for shape 1. And again, one more time for path 1 until we finally reveal this path property with the stopwatch next to it. Let's click on that stopwatch. We now have three properties with keyframes. Let's use After Effects' secret weapon that allows us to just see the keyframes for the properties we're animating. And that is by selecting that layer and pressing U on your keyboard. Once clicked, as you see here, reveals just the properties that have keyframes. If I want to hide those again, I can press U one more time. And if I want to bring those keyframes back, I can press U again. This is a great way to keep your layers under control. Okay, with those keyframes at the beginning of my timeline, I'm going to click on my current time indicator, and I'm going to move to the point where Frank is just at the end of his move looking to his right. And I'm going to change the position property by selecting position and clicking on my selection arrow and moving that up and to the right like so. I'm then going to take this rotation property and drag it to the right. There's one more property though that I want to animate. I'm going to choose this path property, and I'm going to come over here to my pen tool, and I'm going to click and hold to reveal the Convert Vertex tool. This Convert Vertex tool works the same as the one in Illustrator. Currently, this vertex is a corner vertex, but I'm going to turn that into a curve by using my Convert Vertex tool and dragging down and to the left like so. Now I can see I have a bit of an ordering issue. My arm and hand are currently above my head. I won't worry about that right now. But I now have a movement of my arm that looks somewhat natural. Even though the hand is parented to this arm, I can still animate the hand independently. For example, if I brought up the rotation value for the hand, created a keyframe here at the beginning, and then rotated that hand back this way, you can see that the hand will also rotate as it's being moved up with the arm. But before we do anything else, let's think about the movement itself. I'm going to click on my spacebar to play this back. And you can see that the movement is a bit stiff and robotic. That's because the keyframes that are describing this movement are linear keyframes. But let's use our Motion 2 panel to add a little bit of easing in and out of this movement. We can do that by clicking on this middle slider and dragging it to the right. I'm going to drag it to about 70. If I play this motion back now, you can see that now that feels a little bit less robotic. I'm going to move along my timeline to the point where I feel it next needs to move, and that's this shift from this point down to this point. And I'm just going to position my current time indicator there. What I'd like to do is have this arm and its rotation and its shape hold for this period of time, so there isn't much animation going on. So to do that, I'm going to select these keyframes and I'm going to copy them. Right as this movement begins and the head starts to move down, I'm going to paste those copied keyframes. So now the arm stays in that position for that period of time. I'm going to move along my timeline to the point where the head stops moving down, right about there. And I'm going to make sure that I'm still working with the position property. I'm going to select the position property in my timeline. And again, with my selection arrow, I'm going to click and drag on that arm and drag it down. I think at this point too, I might change the rotation. I might bring the arm down a little bit like this. And even though I'm not going to change the path property at this point, I am still going to create a keyframe for that, because I am going to make a change to that shape from this point on. I'm going to now move along my timeline to the next big movement. Very slowly, the head is moving to the left, but very quickly it picks up speed right about this frame here. And again, the arm doesn't move much from this point to this point. So again, I'm just going to copy those keyframes, Command-C on my keyboard, and Command-V to paste them at the place of my current time indicator. But from here to here, there's a larger shift. So the first thing I'm going to do is select my position property. And again, with my selection arrow, I'm going to move that arm a little bit out like that. I'm not going to change the rotation of the arm, but I am going to put a keyframe in it there nonetheless. I am now, though, going to change the shape of this arm by coming to my pen tool, again choosing my Convert Vertex tool, and by clicking on this vertex point, I'm going to click and drag up so the arm is bent like this. You can see I now have that movement. Finally, I want to get the arm into its original resting position when the face is looking forward. Again, I'm going to select these original keyframes for those properties, Command-C and Command-V to paste those in place. I now have an arm moving like that. Now you can see here there's a point where the hand does need to rotate again, so I'm going to rotate that hand down like that, and then it's off the screen, so it doesn't matter after that. And the last thing I need to do is bring my Frank head above the hand and arm layer. Okay, there is my arm animation using the pen tool.